a parallel here between these two verses, but then look at verse 1 of chapter 24. Be not thou envious against evil men, neither desire to be with them. Now look at verse 19 of chapter 24. Fret not thyself because of evil men, neither be thou envious at the wicked. Amazing thing about the book of Proverbs is he really packs some of these principles into a tight space. And he hits it over and over and over again here in this passage. And so 3 times from verse 17 of chapter 23 to verse 19 of chapter 24, you have be not envious at the wicked, or don't envy the sinner, don't envy the wicked or the evil. And then once in the middle of that, he says this, here's the opposite, my son, give me thine heart. Give me thine heart. And there's a reason for the warning. And he's going to tell you, look at verse 18. For surely there is an end. You see that? For surely there is an end. So in much the same way as at the beginning of the chapter, he's going to give some things that we need to consider. At the end of the chapter, he's going to give us some things, some warnings, and the warning is based on this. You better consider that there is an end to this thing. Which is much the same as what he said earlier. Consider with me, if you would, the favor of the ruler. Do you understand how fleeting that is? What do you mean? Trying to get on his good side, right? They're trying to appeal to you to get what they want out of you. It's not what's best for you that they're coming to you with. It's what's best for them. And so you have to take the time, even though they present it in a manner that's good for you. You ever have somebody in business try that? They're called salespeople. They are. They're trying to present what is best for them as if it is best for you. You got to watch that. You got to consider what they're saying. Why? Well, look at the end result. Is it really better for you? You know, somebody said, I bought 3 jackets so I could get the 4th for free. Hey, you probably didn't need to pay for that 2nd or 3rd jacket. You understand? Like, you can only wear one of them at a time. But we can get sucked into those things so often. And we need to consider that the end of this thing. Then with food, you realize how the end of food is very bad when you just gorge and consume. And I'll show you that's the context. Let's do this. Look at verse 20. Verse 20. Be not among winebibbers, among riotous eaters of flesh, for the drunkard and the glutton shall come to poverty. You understand? Consider the end of that thing. Consider the end of it. You realize if you overeat, it doesn't do good for your health? Now, how many of us enjoy overeating? Be honest. We enjoy the overeating. We don't enjoy the aftermath of overeating. Right? Everybody likes the 2nd and 3rd and 10th piece of cake. The 2nd sleeve of Oreos. You know, we all like to eat the rest of whatever it is, but we don't like afterwards. And this is evidenced on Thanksgiving Day more than anything. Everybody loves chowing down Thanksgiving meal. I mean, heaping their plate full, and then everybody afterwards, oh, I ate too much. Well, no kidding. But there was no consideration for the, oh, I ate too much. It was just, let me do it. And amazingly, there's a warning. People say this a lot of times, and it'll come in a minute, but the way to a man's heart's through his stomach. So softening you up, buttering you up, cooking real good. Hey, you better consider what the intention is. You better consider the end of it, right? So the favor and the food, but then even the fleeting of riches. You understand that riches, a love of money, and that's what we dealt with at the beginning. What he's showing there, the heart that going after riches, it is never satisfied. Listen to me. It is never satisfied. If you love abundance, you will not be satisfied with abundance. If you go after silver, you will not be satisfied with silver. I thought or read something this week I thought was so great, and that is that contentment makes what you have enough, and gratitude makes what you have enjoyable. You realize that's wisdom? Godliness with contentment is great gain. Being pleased to just say, hey, I've done what I'm supposed to. That's enough. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. There's no dollar amount that will ever be enough if you go after dollar amounts. There's not a single one. You meet the man who just wants to make $1 million. You know what happens when he makes $1 million? He jumps up. It might be 10 million. Oh, now I want to make 10 million. I'm going to make 30 million. So you can do what? Have enough to retire. No, you don't. Why? Because you have enough to retire. You know what you're most interested in? Doing. It's not, and you got to consider the end of that thing. A covetous spirit will destroy you. And by the way, it's idolatry. But then we get to the end here. He says, let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. For surely there is an end. And he's going to list three things here. Like we said, verse 17 and 18 would be this. You can write this down. Affections. A warning about your affection. Let not thine heart envy sinners. I'm going to give you the other two, though we probably won't get there. And that is, in verse 20, be not among. And he's going to list some people to avoid. So the warnings are your affections, your associations, and then at the end of the chapter, from verse 29 down, who hath woe, who hath sorrow, who hath contentions, who hath babblings, who hath wounds without cause, who hath redness of eyes, they that tarry long at the wine, that go to seek mixed wine. We're just going to say alcohol. He's going to give some warnings about some things, your affections, your associations, and then he ends the chapter with alcohol. And we'll look at these warnings with this idea, verse 18, for surely there is an end. You need to consider, what is the end of the road I'm on? What is the end of this affection? What is the end of this association? And what is the end of alcohol? Because you understand that everybody wants to talk about alcohol when it's at the beginning, but never at the end. And listen, you don't become a drunk if you don't ever start down the road. You don't become alcoholic if you never drink alcohol. And everybody wants to talk about what about the beginning, but nobody wants to consider the end. And if you don't consider the end, you're going to wind up there. And so he's giving a warning that, hey, you got to consider that there's more to this thing. And you need to be aware. And so the first one is affections, our affections. Here it is, let not thine heart envy sinners. Now, why in the world would we envy sinners? Brother Sam, that on the surface just seems foolish. Right? The Bible says the way of the transgressor is hard. It's hard. So why would we want the life of the sinner? Well, let's come back to the first 5 verses and let's see if we can't figure this out. When thou sittest to eat with a ruler, consider diligently what is before thee. Put a knife to thy throat if thou be a man given to appetite. Notice, be not desirous of his dainties, for they are deceitful meat. Labor not to be rich. Cease from thine own wisdom. Wilt thou set thine eyes upon that which is not? For riches certainly make themselves wings. They fly away as an eagle toward heaven. Isn't it interesting that here what we have in front of us are appearances and abundance that are being displayed in these verses. Appearance and abundance, as though there is, as if it is the norm of life. But really, the truth of the matter is all they are being used to trick you into thinking you could have something better than what you have. His dainties. He's laid them out before you, and it's made it out like, oh, we do this all the time. Right? You ever go over to somebody's house, and man, they offer you, you want this, and it's a nice meal. You're like, man, we don't eat this good. Well, neither do they. You understand? They had company coming and made good food. They make boxed macaroni and cheese too sometimes. Like, you understand? Like they put in a frozen pizza just like you do from time to time. And it's not always steak. And, it's not always lobster. It's not always the finest of the whatever. Sometimes it's, hey, what are we eating tonight? Cereal. But you understand, I've never been not anywhere to anyone's house where they ever said, preacher, you want to come over? We're having a bowl of cereal tonight. But watch, by show of hands, how many of you have eaten a bowl of cereal at night? Look at us. But we don't offer that as an appearance, do we? People don't typically say, hey, you want to come over to the house and have some ramen noodles? We'll get real fancy and throw a piece of cheese in there. Come on now. You're our beloved guest. No. We're like, what? I mean, we have 85 steaks for you to choose from. What do you mean? Isn't this how we always eat? Oh, I just threw this together. This old meal? This is just Tuesday. Nonsense. And yet, the appearance of it and the abundance that is being offered, it's set before him. It is made out as though that people are living above what your means are, and you can't attain to what they have, and it's just so free-flowing. But you've never taken the time to consider that they might be up to their eyeballs in debt, that it's just a fake facade. They're not actually living that way. You realize that social media has convinced you that other people have it all together, and those that are trying to convince you so hard clearly don't, or they wouldn't be trying to convince you. You realize people that have it together aren't convincing other people they have it together? They're just living their life. The ones who are out there on social media trying to convince you, man, we got it all figured out. Look at how easy life is. They're just lying. And yet we've been influenced in our generation by sinners, and our hearts begin to envy that. Look at verse, let's see here. I tell you what, let's come to Psalm 73. Let's come back to Psalm 73. I have no intention of getting to the last two warnings tonight, so we'll give you this one warning and be done. Trying to do better about time. Although for the last two nights, we've started our second preacher at 9 p.m., so I'm doing just fine. I want just you to read the chapter with me, because this is exactly what's being dealt with in our proverb. Notice, truly God is good to Israel, even to such as have a clean heart. That's a statement of truth, right? Truly. Then look at verse 2. But as for me, my feet were almost gone, my steps had well nigh slipped. Have you ever known something was true but not felt like it was? Can I tell you, all of us deal with that? All of us have to deal with that. In fact, let me throw this out there to you. This is how it's supposed to work. Watch, I'll show it to you, okay? This is how it's supposed to work. You are taught something, and then it is proven. All right? So God reveals something to you. He teaches you. Let me demonstrate. You can trust God. How many of you believe that tonight? How many of you understand beyond a shadow of a doubt, I know that God is trustworthy? All right, but have you ever faced something that you weren't quite sure you were going to make it through? And you weren't quite sure as to whether or not you could trust Him with that. You say, wait a minute, I know I can trust God. Right, and then that is going to have to be proven in your life. There are a lot of people that will stand up and say, bless God, I'll never leave the church. Hey, that's a great statement, and you might believe it to your core. But now you're going to have to prove it. You understand that's a hard thing to prove? You say, well, what makes it so hard? Well, what happens when it doesn't go your way? I'll never leave until you leave. There have been many people who believed it, many people who say, hey, I'll trust God with anything. And then when God allows something to come into their life that they weren't expecting, they went, oh, anything but that. Anything but that. And yet, here's how it works, because this is how this thing's supposed to work. We go, okay, God, even just in trust and in faith, we believe that God will help us with this. And then we come to this and we say, oh man, I know God can take care of it, but I don't know if He's going to. I'm not sure. I don't know. And God comes through and He proves Himself. And watch, we go, hey, He's proven that He's trustworthy. Thank God. And here's what we do. We can trust God with anything. We know we can. And then He goes, okay, what about this? And then we're going, oh, I don't know if we can trust God with this. I'm not sure we can. And at our core, we go, God's trustworthy. You can trust Him. But inside of us, we go, but as for me, my feet had well nigh slipped. God, are you even aware of what's going on? Master, carest thou not that we perish? That's the disciples. And so what happens? What happens is He takes us to this next thing, and we wonder. But John, I've wondered. Boy, I knew God could take care of this, and we look back and we thank God for all He's ever done. But now what about this? And you know what you'll find in this? Hey, He's trustworthy still. He comes through again. And then it's like, oh yeah, God. I mean, right away, pretty soon we're like, oh yeah, you can trust God with anything. And you say, what's happening? Our faith is growing. And we're supposed to go from faith to faith. It's supposed to increase. We're supposed to be growing in our knowledge of Him. And so He's proving Himself. And so this is how it works out, is a lot of times we know truth. And I've said it this way in the past. It would be this. A lot of times as a preacher, Brother Brian, we get real excited about learned truths. Here's what I mean. Brother Sam, you're reading something in the Bible and God shines His light on it and you go, I get it. I see it. It's right there in black and white. Oh, that's so good. Oh, that is so helpful. And I'm going to tear the world upside down with this truth. And you know what happens? You get up there and you preach it. A lot of times, it's like, nobody even got that. Boy, they missed out. But often what happens is this, and as a young preacher, you don't even understand, especially when you're young and in age as well as maturity spiritually, you just don't even get this. And that is that a lot of times we get so excited about learned truth, but God is way more interested in lived truth. And there's a big difference on your side, the hearer's side, when it's somebody who stands up and says, man, I just got saved and you can trust God with anything. Well, that's a statement of truth. But then it's totally different when it's a missionary who's been on the field for 60 years and he's lost his children and he's lost his wife and he's been through all these things and he stands up and with tears in his eyes he says, listen to me guys, you can trust God with anything. And you go, oh, that man, he knows what he's talking about. And he didn't say anything different than the young man that said, you can trust God with everything. But one learned it, and the others lived it. And you say, what's the difference? It's not the truth that's different. It's just that this has been proven. How many of us know we ought to be faithful? You understand that the only way to prove that's to be faithful. That takes time, doesn't it? And there's a big difference between the two. A big difference. And so we see that here. This is taking place. We have in the psalm someone who knows the truth. Truly, God is good to Israel. But we're faced with the, but as for me. And notice what the problem is, verse 3. For I was envious at the foolish. Remember, let not thine heart envy sinners. I was envious at the foolish when I saw the, what's the word? prosperity of the wicked. Remember, our chapter's dealing with the abundance and the appearance of affluence and wealth. And here he said, I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked. Now he goes on, for there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm. Well, that's a lie. I love this, verse 5. They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men. You know, the wicked just don't have any problems. Just seems like they have it so easy, doesn't it? You say, well, I wouldn't say that about the wicked. Please listen, you might say that about the rich. Remember the prosperity of the wicked? Oh, they just don't have problems like we have problems. You understand you're buying into a lie? It's a falsehood. It's a falsehood. Rich people got big problems. Verse 6, therefore pride compasseth them as about as a chain, violence covereth them as a garment. Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than heart could wish. They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily. They set their mouth against the heavens. Their tongue walketh through the earth. Therefore his people return hither, and waters of a full cup are wrung out to them. And they say, how doth God know? And is there knowledge in the Most High? Behold, these are the ungodly who prosper in the world. They increase in riches. Verily, I've cleansed my heart in vain, washed my hands in innocency. Listen to me, kids. Listen to me. Some of us that are a little bit older, listen to me, please. Some of us that are a little bit older have lived a truth that you're learning, and that is that it doesn't pay to go the way of the world. It doesn't pay to live a life of sin. And I can tell you that, and please listen to me, you will say, truly, it doesn't pay. But you know what your heart's going to want to do? You know what your heart will do? It'll begin to envy sinners. Why? Because it looks like it does pay to go the way of the world. And you say, hey, there's nothing out there for you. But it looks like there's something out there for you. And there is pleasure in sin for a season. And that season becomes appealing. And the warning of our chapter is you better be careful that your heart doesn't begin to envy sinners. Why? Because it looks like they're just moving along. Look at the nice cars they have. Look at the bad car and this poor house and the tiny thing. Look at what this Christian has. Boy, it must not pay to be a Christian. Oh, no. It pays to be a Christian. Are you listening to me? It pays to be a Christian. You say, why? Because what the child of God has that the world doesn't is peace, is love, is true riches, like the grace of God. The world tries to allure you. Well, look what we've got. We got all this stuff. And the psalmist here is saying, man, that's where I was. I'm envious at them. And he even turned inward and said in verse 13, verily I've cleansed my heart in vain and washed my hands in innocency. Brother Willie, he said, I wasted my time. It'd have been better for me if I had grown up in the world. How about this one? It'd have been better if I had gone to public school. I'd have more friends. I'd be a cool kid. Hey, we like to get onto the teenagers and the kids for this mentality. Truth of the matter is, adults, you get the same way. You say, no, I'd never get that way. Oh, no. You might be 1 or 2 steps down the road, but your heart starts envying when you look up and go, man, they've got 401ks and life insurance policies. And here we are just trying to barely getting by serving the Lord. I mean, we're given to missions and we're given to the church and we're giving to this and we're helping these people out, and it seems like we can't ever get ahead. What I'm trying to tell you is you're already ahead. But we begin to envy the abundance or the affluence, and we get sidetracked without ever considering the end. You understand? You're going to lay up treasure here or in heaven. Which one do you think matters more? I mean, seriously. You know what happens? Look, it happens in my own heart. You know what happens? We know that's true, but it doesn't feel like it's true, does it? When everybody around you seems to be doing better than you, it doesn't feel like it's true. And that's where Psalm 73 is. Notice, verse 14, for all the day long have I been plagued and chastened every morning. How many of you, that just became your life verse right there, right? Boy, that's me right there. All day long I've been plagued, chastened every morning. I know His mercies are new every morning, but so are the plagues, man. I mean, I'm telling you, it's just as bad. No. You got to get it. That's how He's feeling. Every step He takes, there's trouble. He said, if I say I'll speak thus, behold, I should offend against this generation, or the generation of thy children. Now notice, when I thought to know this, it was too painful for me. It hurt Him because He knows better. Boy, He's feeling this way. You know what He feels like? It feels like God's let Him down. It's vanity. Why did I do this? Why did I choose this direction? Why did I go the way of God? I'm longing after and envying what's out there. You know what's out there? Nothing. It's nothing. It's vanity. It's empty. There's nothing out there that's good for you. He doesn't feel that way. It feels like God's hidden from him the good things of life. That's what he feels like. In verse 17, he says, until I went into the sanctuary of God, then understood I their end. Why? For surely there is an end. You know what changed the direction? You know what changed the mindset? You know what changed the heart here in Psalm 73? And what our proverb is telling us to do is this. Hey, you better be careful. There's a warning about your affection because it's going to appeal to you. It's going to look good. That's why you got to consider why it looks good to you out there. And you better be careful because all of that is going to cause your heart to seek after it and to go after wealth and go after vanity and go after the things of the world. And if you're not careful, you'll forget that there's an end to that road. You'll forget that money's never made anybody happy. You'll forget that it's not the answer. And you need to consider the end. Consider the end. And here the psalmist said, man, I was envious at the foolish. I saw their prosperity. It was too hard for me. Even just thinking about it was too painful for me. I feel like I messed up, made the wrong choice in serving God. Should have gone after something else where I could make better money. All right. So here's what it looks like for your preacher when he's going through that. You ready? Can I be honest? Because I'm opening up here. This is transparency. You ready? I can make a lot more money if I was a general contractor. If I was in a bigger city, building houses, you understand I could make a lot more money than I can here in Trinidad? Wouldn't have to struggle so much to provide for my family. You understand that there's a desire in every one of us men to provide for our family? You realize that's not gone just because I'm a pastor? You know what will happen? The devil will try to throw that carrot out there and dangle it. Look at all these guys that are making a bunch of money being general contractors. Hey, you could do that. Yeah, I could. What is that? Puffing up, right? I could do the same thing, make the same money. You know what I'd be missing out on? Truly. You know what I'd be missing out on? John getting saved a couple weeks ago. Montana and Brianna getting saved on Sunday. Do you understand? There's not an amount of money worth that. There really isn't. You know what I'd be missing out on? When God takes His Word and helps you and lets me have a part in that. I don't deserve this. This is a privilege. It really is an honor to get to do what I'm doing. And I'm not worse off because I don't make as much money as I could have. You know what my uncle told me? A little before I ever became a pastor. You know what he told me? You should go back to school and get a business degree. Have something to fall back on just in case. You know what I've thought over the years as things haven't gone great and different struggles and whatever? You know what I've thought? Brother Ed, construction would be a whole lot easier than pastoring. I mean, it'd be a whole lot simpler. Except, do you know what I have found every single time? Every time I've ever gone back out working and had to work 2 jobs. Miss Rebecca will tell you this more than anybody else here other than my wife. You know what happens? I'm working 2 jobs, and you know what I find? I'm sick and tired of carpentry. I'm sick and tired of having to go to work every day and swing a hammer. You say, why? Why? Because my heart's here. Like this is what I'm called to be. And even though in here at times there's a draw to something else, the truth is I'd never be happy as a general contractor. Ever. I don't care if I was making $10 million a year, I'd never be happy out there. But I don't have to make any and be happy right here. I've gone to bed on a Sunday night so full. Oh man, this is the best thing that anybody could ever get to do. And seeing people get help and having the Spirit of God meet with us in this place, and to think He's meeting with us. He wants to meet with us. What a privilege. What an honor to get to have a part in this. So what is it? Well, you see, if you try to look at abundance, you try to look at the appearance, boy, your heart starts to drift a little and wander a little. Come on, is that too honest for you? How many of you have wandered a little bit in your heart and go, man, it sure seemed like it'd be easier if I could pull some overtime on Sunday with all these bills instead of having to. But you know the truth is you could work all the overtime in the world, you could have all the money in the world, but if you're not right with God, you're going to be miserable. And kids, I wish that I could learn the lesson and you could get it. I really do. And the advice or the warning is so you don't have to learn it the hard way. But every lesson you ever learn and go, okay, that's a truth, you're then going to have to live. And the truth is that if you love the world, you'll wind up in a mess. And the truth is, if your affections are that your heart envies sinners, you're going to wind up a mess. If you look at the people that are promoted in our society, and you look at them and go, wow, they got a great life. Listen, you've been lied to, and your heart will envy that if you're not careful. Why? Because they don't have a good life. People look at Taylor Swift and get the idea. She's worth over $1 billion now. I don't even know how that's possible. $1 billion. Boy, she must have just the greatest life ever, right? You realize she's been through like 8 dudes in the last 10 years? What does that tell you? She's miserable. She can't find happiness anywhere. Why? Because there's only one person that's going to meet that need. Amen. Hey, listen, your parents can't meet that need for you. It's only Jesus Christ. The world will never meet that need. Your spouse can't meet that need for you. It's only Jesus Christ. Oh, be careful of your affections. Look at verse 19. Verse 18 says, surely, there's that word again, right? Surely there is an end. Surely thou didst set them in slippery places. Thou castest them down into destruction. How are they brought into desolation as in a moment they're utterly consumed with terrors? How many of you want verse 19? Any takers? I thought verse 5 says they're not in trouble as other men. What's the difference? Well, there's an end. There's an end. And listen to me, child of God, it matters. It matters that you consider the end. And the warning here is that your affections will become placed in something that is fickle or fleeting, something that will never satisfy and is a lie, and you'll place all your love and affection toward that. No, I just want to go after this. Well, you can go after that with all your heart, and you're going to find that when you give it everything you've got and you're all done, that there's nothing there for you. You understand? Some of the greatest athletes of all time, reach the pinnacle of success in their sports, wind up retired and going, I got nothing now. You know what's amazing? They go through depression. Depression. Why? Well, I just retired, and I don't even know what to do with my life anymore. I gave my whole life to this, and now it's gone. What do I have to show for it? And we would think, man, they got the best life ever. No, they don't. You want to know who has the best life ever? Please listen. You're looking at them. You know who has the best life ever? People who are serving God and are living for God. You say, oh, I don't want what they have. You don't want a happy life. You don't want an enjoyable home. You don't want a good relationship with your spouse. You don't want a love. What are you talking about? You'd be glad to have my life. So come back to Proverbs 23. I need to hurry. We're almost done. Proverbs 23. Look at the other. Not only verse 17, let not thine heart envy sinners. But it's more than just, hey, don't do that, right? How many of you, hey, stop that. What am I supposed to do? Just not exist? Like just be here in... No. Here it is. You ready? Look at verse 26. My son, give me thine heart. And let thine eyes observe my ways. My son, give me thine heart. And let thine eyes observe my ways. Amazing truth here. Amazing truth. And the warning was this: look, you're going to have an affection for something. You're gonna have to place your heart somewhere on something. And here's what he told him: hey, why don't you trust me with it? That's a pretty bold statement, isn't it? And here's what he said: let thine eyes observe my ways. Come with me to the New Testament, 2 places, and I'm done. 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy chapter 3. And here's the deal, parents, adults, We're telling these kids, well, you better have your affections in order, in the right place. You know what the truth of the matter is? The truth of the matter is they often are looking at us and going, well, their affections are out there, so that's where my affections should be. Truth of the matter is we look into church and go, well, boy, everybody here is just living for the world anyway, so I might as well just live for the world because that's apparently what you're supposed to do, and that's not it at all. And no wonder the world looks so appealing, because there's nothing more miserable than a Christian who's not living for God. If you're half in, half out tonight, you'll be miserable. Miserable. How many of you adults know that's the true statement? You've been half in and half out, haven't you? It's not any good. Hey, you know what's real bad? You know what's been real bad in my life? When that affection begins to go toward the things of the world, going, I'd rather be a general contractor. Those are the most miserable times I've ever had as a pastor. Truly. Why? Because double-minded. Look at 2 Timothy chapter 3, look at verse 10. Paul's writing to Timothy. Here's what he says. But thou hast fully known my doctrine. Notice this next phrase. Manner of life. Timothy, you've lived with me. Quite literally, lived with me. You know how I operate. How many of you kids know how your parents act? You know what? This is what Paul just told Timothy. Timothy, you know me. How many of you kids know something about your parents that not everyone else knows? Kids, right? We know stuff about our parents that not everybody else knows. Why? Because you're around them. Notice what he said. You know my purpose. Ooh. I wonder, parents, do your kids know your purpose? My purpose. Faith. Long-suffering. How many of you kids, just your kids, could say, well, I know my dad's long-suffering. I know my mom's long-suffering. Or is it, I know my mom's short temper or my dad's short temper? Right? You understand the difference? Charity. This is Paul writing. You know my patience. Now watch. Persecutions. You see that? Afflictions. Which came into me at Antioch and Iconium, at Lystra. I mean, he's like, which one you want? This one, that one, that. Timothy, you know all this, which I endured. But out of them all, the Lord delivered me. Yea, and all that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. You realize Timothy knew that truth? He's having to live that truth. Be reminded of it. The evil men and seducers shall wax worse and worse, deceiving and being deceived. But continue thou in the things which thou hast learned and hast been assured of. There it is. That's the point. Knowing of whom thou hast learned them. I'll stop there. Can I tell you, it's going to have to be real. One more verse, Hebrews 13. Hebrews 13. There have been seasons of my life that I've struggled. And thought, man, it'd be just so much easier to not have to try to plant this thing again. Just be easier. Do you understand what we'd have missed out on if the last time when things weren't going great was the time we just decided to give in? Just give up. You understand? All this wouldn't be here. Or maybe it'd be here, but I would be missing out on it. Like, do you understand all the blessing that was available that we wouldn't have never seen? Look at Hebrews 13, if you would, verse 7. Remember them which have the rule over you, who have spoken unto you the word of God. These are those that are teaching you what is true. Now watch. Whose faith follow. Notice the last part. Considering what? The end of their conversation. Hey, you have a choice to consider. You're supposed to consider at the end. Surely there is an end. You have a choice to consider. Look at the world. And here he says, look at those that have taught you the word of God. And consider the end of their conversation. Which one do you want? I was having a conversation with somebody today. Somebody said, familiarity breeds contempt. There's been a generation of preachers that have preached, don't let people get too close to you, right? Or they might develop a certain disdain for your failures. Now listen, at best, a man of God is still just a man. There's plenty to nitpick and point out in my life that you could say, that's not right. And if you can't find any, my wife could give you a long list. But you know what it is? Instead of, Brother Austin, keeping people at an arm's distance. Watch now, because this is what's being taught. Well, just keep people, don't let them get too close. So instead of keeping people at an arm's distance and worrying about whether or not you ever see what's wrong, why not just as the leaders of our homes, men, parents, as the leaders of our children, instead of trying to keep that hidden from our kids, why not just try to spend that time getting it right? And acknowledging, hey, you know what? That was wrong of me. And I'm going to fix it. Why? Because at home, there is no arm's length. I don't care. You could try. You might be able to mask some things. But if you think you're hiding it from your kids, you're fooling you. Only you. Instead of the arm's length distance rule, why not spend that amount of energy just getting this right? And a warning about our affections. Why? Because we're supposed to be a representation of what it looks like to go down the road of faith. That's what that verse teaches. Oh, a couple more verses later, obey them that have the rule over you. Right? We like that verse. Yeah, submit to them. What about this verse? That's a little scary. This is pointed out that as a pastor, do you realize you're supposed to look at my life and be able to decide, yeah, I want his faith? Can I tell you, your kids are supposed to be looking at your faith, parents, and what it means to be a Christian in your life and say, that's what I want. Your neighbors, your coworkers, they're supposed to be able to look at that and say, that's what I need right there. We'd go to Hebrews 11 and say, that's what I want. Abraham, Enoch, Noah, whew. God, give us faith like that, right? Well, that's who we're supposed to be for them. So the warning is this. You better be careful about your affections. Why? Because there's an end. But let not thine heart envy sinners, but be thou in the fear of the Lord all the day long. Why? For surely there is an end. Hey, they need to see what the end looks like. Parents, they need somebody that's further down the road. Remember when we said there's a little different from somebody who's 12 years old, called to preach, standing up saying, you can trust God with anything. Hey, and you can. And if you're 12 years old and called to preach, you need to preach that you can trust God with everything. But it's a little different when it's the old man, isn't it? Why? Because you're considering their end. Boy, they're all the way over here telling you you can still trust him. Doesn't it mean something? That they've been through all that and known him like they do, and they're still telling you, hey, you can trust him. It's one thing to blame a generation that loves the world. But if they've looked at our testimony and turned that way, are we really to blame them or to blame the generation that failed to present what the end looks like? Stand to our feet.